Hello, good morning.
Morning.
How are you, Janice?
I'm good. And you?
What can I say? It's Saturday already. Another weekend. I'm fine, all things considered. Trying to keep up with you young whippersnappers. Just giving your colleagues a few more minutes to settle in and log in, and then we shall begin. Let's give them 5 minutes. Okay, let's begin. Just the others will join us somewhere along the way. Okay, let's see who's in the room. Hmm. I don't see Lovette yet. I don't see DeAndre yet. Siobhan, is that you?
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning, good morning. You made it.
Yes.
Okay. Leah, did you make it?
Barely, but yes.
Yes, barely, but yes. No problem. Big deal, you made it. Okay, Melissa.
Morning here.
Hi, Melissa.
Morning.
Janice is still in the room.
Yes.
Hey, lovely, lovely. Okay, so the others will have to catch us up if they come in today. We have a forum, so we'll begin. First things first. Did anybody have any chance to look at the self-assessment questions for the last 2 units?
Yes, I did.
Okay, excellent. We'll look at those coming to the end. Make sure I don't close the session without us going over those questions. The brain is a strange thing. When you go through stuff like that, it seems like, oh God, more work. But what's really happening is, without even being aware of it, the brain is recording stuff, and some of this crazy stuff actually stays with us, depending on who we are and our level of interest in it. Okay, so just throwing out a little encouragement there for all the crazy stuff you're doing. Okay, so somewhere around the last 30 minutes, if I'm still yapping about something, ring the bell, let me know we're coming to the end so that we can go through those self-assessment questions. For those persons who submitted on the objects of a trust, was it great going back in history to look up the fundamentals again? I hope. No, it was a pain in the butt. Anyone, were you happy about being reminded of the objects of a trust? Is that a yes or no?
It wasn't bad.
Actually, the reason why I picked the objects of a trust, it wasn't random. First of all, I did want to do a throwback just to remind you as students and practitioners that as you move forward, what you've done in the past is never irrelevant. Anybody believes that? Or am I just talking out of my head? As you move forward, what you've done in the past is never irrelevant. Do you? Anyone? Alicia, is that you?
Yes, sir, it is. Good morning, everyone. My name is
Good
Robinson.
How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Who rolled you out of bed this morning?
Still in.
Yeah, just happy to not have to get up and go somewhere.
That's correct.
Indeed, indeed. Unless you one of those people who just have to go somewhere all the time. But yeah, I get it completely. Welcome aboard. You made it.
Yes, sir, thank you.
I was just asking the question. I was just asking the question about the objects question that I asked, and I was saying to the group, as you move forward in your learning and your experiences, does it mean that what you've learned in the past is no longer important? I was waiting for an answer. Is it still important or not? what you've learned in the past?
Um, it's still important, but now we're learning the right way, the legal way, or so it's still important.
It's always important.
Right.
For example, see, you're learning new and more sophisticated stuff as you go forward. That's perfect. That's what it's supposed to be. But I'll give you guys an example that you might find helpful in your practical work and lives going forward. If you never learned your alphabet, where would you be? Anyone? If you never learned your alphabet, where would you be?
Lost.
Completely. And when did you learn your alphabet? How old were you? On average.
That's two, I guess. I'm not sure.
Yeah, 2, 3, 4, depending on people start saying, say ABC. And we think, oh, that's a long time ago. How can that be important? Don't bother me, I'm busy. But think about it. If you didn't learn your alphabet, everything in your life would be a total mess in that regard. See? And it's the same principle. Whatever you're learning, you guys are learning trust principles and administration, but the certainties of the trust are always going to be fundamental, are they not? Are they not?
Yes. I guess you just build on those.
You don't have to guess, Janice. You do. Without those, you have no trust, do you? Do you?
Right.
Yeah, and if you have no trust, then all this other stuff you're learning you can't use because you have no trust. How about that? All right. So don't play down the fundamentals. They will plague you, they will be there, and they'll be necessary every single time. Speaking about necessary, we're going to talk about forced airships today, but let's go back to the 3 certainties of a trust. What are they? Anyone?
Hello? Is it, is it certainty of intent,
Yeah.
subject matter and objects?
Yes. Certainty of intent, certainty of subject matter, certainty of objects. Now, for you guys who are learning new and bigger and better things, what do we mean by certainty of intent?
You have to be clear and precise in what you want the trust instrument to say.
Yeah, you have to be clear that you want to trust to begin with. You can't say, well, I'm here because I believe, I feel I might want to trust. You cannot do that. When the settler goes in, the settler has to say, I am here to establish and settle a trust, period. Prepare the document for me to sign. That's what intent is. Intent is very specific. Anything ambiguous, that trust could be challenged. But the settler really didn't intend to do it. So if they come in drunk and say, I'm here, I think to settle, I believe. Am I really drunk on a trust? That's not going to work because that could be challenged. So what about uncertainty of subject? What is that about?
Subject matter is the property of the trust. Any assets are property of the trust.
Yeah, any
To
asset?
be clearly identified.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we know the key to establishing a trust is, first of all, intent. The intent and desire to establish a trust. However, we also know that without a subject or property or assets, what is there to transfer into the trust? And if there's nothing to transfer into the trust, there's nothing for the trustee to hold in trust. Talk about fundamental. This is trust 101 that you should never even think of forgetting. Or if you do, you forget at your own peril somewhere. What about the third certainty? Certainty of objects. What's that?
The beneficiaries of the trust.
Yes, stating beneficiaries of the trust. Are beneficiaries always known in complete?
No,
No.
sometimes it may be a secret trust,
Yeah, sometimes it might be a secret trust with a
a
beneficiary
partial secret.
or partial secret, or if the beneficiaries are not named, like Melissa or Janice, then in their discretion will have to determine how those assets should be administered and who are the implied beneficiaries by the
Right.
nature of the trust document. For example, if
Grandchildren.
yeah, if a settler says, uh, I'm settling this trust and for the benefit of my beneficiaries, who are all those people I love. Oh my goodness, that becomes a problem. Is that an impossible trust to administer? To all the people I love.
It
Can you
is.
do it?
It is.
Yeah, it's it's difficult, but the trustee then has to go and do a little investigation. Now let me see. How can I establish who are all the people he loved? And so he goes, let me say, could it be his wife, children, neighbors, church people, whatever the case might be, and seek to try and establish that. And if he has any doubt, what is it when he has any doubt whatsoever? Anyone? If the document in the law doesn't make it clear, what do you do?
Go to court.
Yeah.
Courts, yep. Go to the courts. Okay. So I took you guys back in time a little bit just to remind you that the fundamentals never go away. And some of them, if you forget them, you forget them at your peril, which is what some trustees actually end up doing, believe it or not, in practice. Okay. They either was not very clear on those fundamentals, or they thought they were, or they knew they were there somewhere, but just ignored them and decided to do what they felt like doing in their discretion. And then as a result, many trustees, even in today's world, especially in today's world, find themselves being sued by beneficiaries. And sometimes it goes right back to some of these same fundamentals that we're talking about that were either not known, not remembered, or, God forbid, ignored. All right. Deandra, I see you walked in.
Good morning.
Morning, Deandra. Okay, way to go. Way to go. I think that's everybody. Okay. So yeah, I was telling the others earlier, about 30 minutes before we come to the end of the class, ring a bell if I'm still talking. We can go over the self-assessment questions. So those who did them can see what they did, and those who didn't get to it can go ahead and put that information in for future reference if and when necessary.
Okay.
So now, for those who submitted the responses to the question, it was great to see that folks actually went back and looked at the core definitions of who the objects of a trust were, and certainly good to see that in a discretionary trust, the objects are not necessarily going to get the attention that they think they should get, and there's no legal obligation for the trustee to do certain things with regards to those objects, with regards to a discretionary trust. Some folks went even as far back to establish what the three certainties are and how the objects fit in, and certainly that the discretion of the trustee. Some folks kind of define what we mean by discretionary trust, which was good to see. So you kind of picked it a little bit and pinpointed the key issues in the question, to come up with a final response. So yeah, do objects have any rights? Essentially, no, not in a discretionary trust, but it's within the trustee's discretion to act in their interest if they so desire. Okay. Why do we say discretionary trusts as opposed to a non-discretionary trust? Do objects have any rights in a non-discretionary trust? Anyone?
Yes.
Yeah, they do. How come? What would give them rights? Potentially.
Non-discretionary trust is where they have fixed asset, fixed, I guess, disbursements. So the settler would actually say exactly what they want to go to who and where.
Yes, yes. In a non-discretionary trust, the settler will be very specific about the objects. And so, since the trustee in a non-discretionary trust must be guided by the trustee, it doesn't matter what they think or feel or determine. They must follow the deed to the letter or suffer the consequences potentially. It's just as simple as that. On the other hand, the discretionary trust gives the trustee a whole lot of leverage in terms of how he makes decisions. And so the whole ball game with regards to objects becomes quite different. And they can have anything from little rights to no rights, depending on how the trustee decides to exercise that discretion. Okay. So when a settler gives a trustee discretion, that's a serious matter. And sometimes some trustees don't remember that discretion doesn't mean that they have the power to do anything they feel like, which unfortunately many trust administrators in today's world tend to do. They start forgetting that they are nevertheless still there for the benefit of beneficiaries and that they're not to get into power plays. They're supposed to act as a prudent man. Remember that one? The prudent man. Yeah. They're supposed to be fair. They're supposed to exercise their fiduciary responsibility. They're not supposed to act like God and try, just because they have discretion, to do things that are immoral and downright unacceptable. Sorry, I know that's not in the academic notes, but in the real world, that's what happens. As some of you may have seen, and if not, you will see at some point in your career. Okay. Experience is hell. Anybody in this class know anything about experience? No? Oh, Mr. Wilkinson, you know we know. I know you know. Anybody in this class knows anything about experience?
It's the greatest teacher.
Yes, Melissa. And I'm sure we've all had our share of that in one form or another. And for those of you who are in the trust business and going into the trust business, you'll find that your experiences in trust will be unique and they will be ever changing. Every day, there's something interesting going on in the trust world. Okay? As a matter of fact, has anybody heard about the upcoming rules on UBOs? Anybody knows what a UBO is? UBO? Trustees, private bankers? UBO? Nobody's ever heard that acronym before? No? Melissa,
Hi.
for you.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I have a question for you.
Mhm.
Are we the only ones in this class? I'm
It's
just,
early. It's early. It's a Saturday morning.
I know. That's why I'm trying to get folks to say something so they can, while they're rubbing their eyes, they just say something.
I googled UBO ultimate beneficial owner.
UBO is the ultimate beneficial owner. And for those of you who are trustees and in private banking, it'll be a good idea to pay attention to that acronym because some new rules are coming up with regards to UBOs. And some of those rules are going to impact the trust world in a very different way in the very near future. The FATF, I hope you know who they are. If you don't know, Google it, find out who they are, because they continue to impact the world of private banking and trust. Coming up with some additional rules for who ultimate beneficial owners really are, and how they should be disclosed to the appropriate authorities as required.
Who did you say that was?
FATF,
Oh, okay.
yeah. Hopefully somebody in the room has heard about the FATF, and if you haven't, when you get a moment, Google FATF and find out who they are. 'Cause they come up with some rules that impact the financial world. Been doing it for the last 20 years or more. And so now,
Financial Action Task Force.
yes, okay. If you're not familiar with them, do a little read later, just to have an idea of who they are. Uh, Once upon a time, UBOs could hide themselves in underlying companies in a trust. Anybody knew that? No? Once upon a time, UBOs could hide themselves in a company, meaning they could set up a company and either use their name or not, and then put the company into a trust. And so it'd be difficult or impossible for anybody to establish who the UBO was.
Isn't that what they do in the IBC?
All the time. Thank you very much. The only problem with that is not everybody who's hiding is hiding for legitimate reasons. And that's what the FATF and OECD have a problem with, they say, especially in what they call tax havens like this particular jurisdiction. Of course, we are not officially a tax haven anymore, but they still call us that because of our history. Unfortunately, even though many of them have their little versions of tax havens too, but they don't call themselves that. They call other jurisdictions tax havens. And does anybody know why the big countries have a problem with what they call tax havens? Anybody knows why? Anybody in private banking and trust? Or they don't talk about that in staff meetings?
What do you mean? Like you're saying that we are not a tax haven?
Well, we don't call ourselves a tax haven anymore. We meaning the Bahamas, the BVI, and other Caribbean jurisdictions. Okay, Bermuda, Guernsey, those countries. We don't call ourselves tax havens anymore. But once upon a time, we were called tax havens. Does anybody know why?
Because persons will come here and invest their funds, so they don't have to pay taxes in their jurisdiction on those funds.
Yeah, that's a pretty good answer, actually. The only problem is they were not always investment funds. They were just lodged here so that they don't have to pay taxes
Or cash, or, yeah.
in their home countries. So they would bring their cash in suitcases and bags or whatever and dump it in tax havens so that they don't have to declare those cash receipts in their home countries and thus have to pay taxes on that. Okay? So it was a great big tax avoidance, tax evasion kind of situation. And now the big countries have decided that they're losing too many billions of dollars per year. with money that is tucked away in what they call tax havens. And so now we have these new rules by OECD and FATF that force us to disclose who we have in our books. And if they happen to be any European and other nationals, then they can find them and make them pay the required taxes. Yeah, so it's not just a little thingy club where folks are hanging around. This stuff has been around for a long, long time. And suddenly now, because rich countries have discovered, or bigger countries have discovered that a lot of money is being lost in unpaid taxes. So they're now attacking smaller jurisdictions like ours, who were able to make a living from this high tax avoidance, evasion that their citizens wanted to do. They decided enough is enough, and so now we're being bombarded every single day with these issues from the larger countries. So for those of you who are new to the game, young professionals in private banking and trust, settle down. It's going to be an interesting future for you guys. Okay? I just thought I'd throw that out just to sweeten the pot, warm the water. So as you go forward in your professional lives, you'll be, oh my God, this is what he was talking about. And it's a lot more involved than what you might actually be aware of at the moment, but you'll get there. Okay? Just thought I'd warm the pot a little. All right. So after talking about the responsibilities of the trustee for investing trust assets, I hope you remember some of the key principles there, particularly that the trustee has an obligation to invest. They can't tuck it under a pillow and say, I want to play it safe. They do that, they can be sued. Unless they have a super duper unbelievable reason for doing it. Good luck coming up with that one. Okay. So the trustee has to look after the investments for the trust in order to increase the income and capital. That's the whole idea. And they have to do this and try to make sure they preserve the capital along the way and not lose it in some foolish investment projects. Hopefully no trustees invested in FTX. Does anybody know of any trustees invested in FTX? I hope not. Does anybody know if that happened? No? Probably don't know. Well,
You can repeat the question?
does anybody know of any trustees invested in FTX?
Oh, no. No.
Because that would be happening somewhere on the investment side of your trust company. Okay? But the point is, if they did invest in FTX, what do you think happened to that money?
Mr. Wilkinson, I think I remember seeing something about Dell Tech Bank and the FTX. Or are they not considered a trust?
They are a trust as well. And they are very much involved with the issues pertaining to FTX. And they are suspected of having deposits and transactions in the gazillions of dollars with FTX before its collapse. And it is believed that they would have suffered some significant losses somewhere along the way, the extent to which remains unknown. But Dell Tech is not the bank and financial institution that's been impacted by the collapse of FTX. Many institutional investments, pension funds, trusts, trustee investments, and others have been tied up somewhere along the way, some known, some unknown, in the FTX debacle. And many have lost millions of dollars of pension money, trust assets, etc., depending on who the investors were. Okay? So yeah, Welcome to the real world that is not in our current academic notes, but it is certainly a real world phenomenon. FTX being one of the most recent, but not the most recent. You would have heard about the failure of the Silicon Valley Bank. Anybody heard about that?
No,
Yeah.
sir.
So, excuse me, Mr. Wilkinson.
Hi, Lovett.
What happened in the case of the Credit Suisse? I know a lot of people was pulling out of Credit Suisse recently.
Yeah. What happened with Credit Suisse is Credit Suisse has been making very bad investment decisions in recent years. And when I say recent, I mean the last 2 to 5 years. Credit Suisse has been constantly being fined by regulatory authorities for bad behavior. I'm just using that so you could remember bad behavior, violating constantly the regulatory requirements for financial institutions, paying millions and millions of dollars to governments and regulators for continuously violating the rules. And so after a while, that all these millions and millions of dollars that are going out of the company, even though it's the second largest Swiss bank in Switzerland, you start to feel the pinch. And then these payments that you have to keep paying out to regulatory authorities for bad behavior starts to impact your what? Reputation, correct? Correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Reputation. Let's not forget that. And for you guys who are young bankers in general, private bankers and trust in particular, do not underestimate the reputational issue. Okay. I'll give you an example. I know a couple of people that I grew up with who are now who grew up and became what they say they're gay. Okay. Because they're gay, that doesn't mean I no longer know them. I still know them. Being gay doesn't mean I don't know them. And if they pass me and say, hi, Sam, I'll say, I don't agree with that thing. I'll say, hi, no problem. I don't agree with your lifestyle, but I still know you. I still grew up with you. I don't have a problem with you, the person. Now, let's say, for example, one of you guys saw me going into a gay bar. Say, what the hell, Mr. Wilkinson, doing into a gay bar? He must be. Can somebody finish it? He must be. Man.
Gay.
Need a cold.
Yeah, this is really say it. Now, it doesn't mean I'm gay. I may have just gone in to collect some money that a gay person owed me in the gay bar. But because I walk into the gay bar and you guys, this be Deandra, isn't that Mr. Wilkinson? What the? I didn't know that. Okay, and has nothing to do with being gay at all. I went to get my money, but I'm taking a risk, a reputational risk, to go in to get my money. What I should do to avoid reputational damage, depending on who's looking and the environment you're in, is to tell the person who owes me the money, wire it to me, deposit it, meet me in the mall, but don't ask me to come there, because that can create some reputational damage for me, Ralph. It's kind of like that with Credit Suisse, Lovett, okay? Eventually, all this bad behavior is caught up with them, created serious reputational damage, and as a result, major depositors start pulling out their
Money.
money.
Yeah, I asked because we had a case like that. One of the trust companies, well, and IBCs, they were affiliated with that bank,
Of course,
and they asked to have their funds transferred to another bank.
absolutely. It's called a
But
run on the bank.
so that didn't have anything to do with the Silicon Valley thing either. It just was bad management.
Had nothing to do with Silicon Valley. Silicon
Okay.
Valley had its own share of bad management. separate and apart from Credit Suisse. So we have a bunch of banks these days, major banks, doing what they think they fit. See, let me tell you something about power to you youngsters. I guess I have an obligation to say it, because people don't say it much anymore. Maybe you've never heard the expression, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Anybody ever heard that?
Yes.
I thank you, Jan. It's good that you heard that. And those of you who've never heard it, try to remember something what I just said. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that is what happens to a great extent in these financial institutions and other places. When people have this kind of power and all that money under their control, they start doing the wrong stuff all the time. No, not all the time. Certain people, certain groups, certain organizations. And so Credit Suisse has been tied. Go on, you can read it up. It's public knowledge. Bad behavior for years. It's paid out gazillions of dollars in penalties and still wouldn't stop. And so people have now gotten wind of it. They started taking their money out by the gazillions of dollars. And in order to make sure that Credit Suisse didn't collapse completely as the second largest bank in Switzerland, does anybody know what decision was taken? No?
Well, did the Swiss government stepped in and assist?
The Swiss government stepped in to prop it up. And in addition to that, the first largest bank in Switzerland decided to take it over. Anybody knows the name of that bank?
Is it UBS? No.
It is UBS.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. So that's the story of Credit Suisse at the moment. All those persons who had bonds and investments in Credit Suisse, depending on the write down on the loss in value, those people will lose a great amount of their investments, etc., that they have in Credit Suisse. This is the fallout when banks begin to fail and have to be taken over and propped up by governments, regulatory agencies, and other entities. Gazillions of dollars as usual. The question is, where did that money go? Nobody's talking about that. You don't hear them talk about that on CNN. They keep talking about Donald Trump.
Mr. Wilkinson, my internet dropped, so you can just give me a quick review of what happened to Credit Suisse.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. I had to leave and come back.
Yeah, somebody wanted to know why did Credit Suisse fail. I was saying to them, Credit Suisse has been doing bad things for years. They've penalized and paid dollars out, penalties to regulatory agencies and governments around the world. People have finally gotten wind of the fact that there's a great deal of mismanagement and misbehavior going on in Credit Suisse. It has created reputational damage for them. And as a result, investors started taking out their monies by gazillions. And many of those investors include trust companies who have responsibility for the same investments that we were talking about in chapter 6. And so they did what a prudent man would do. Whenever there's reputational damage and doubt, you act, and you act quickly. And I think Lovett said they received instructions under one of their trust facilities to remove their money from Credit Suisse and put it somewhere else. And that's what thousands of depositors decided to do. As a result, the bank has begun to falter, just like FTX did. But before allowing the second largest bank in Switzerland to fail, the government stepped in and UBS stepped in and says, we'll take over Credit Suisse and try to save whatever is left. So there wouldn't be major financial collapses and by extension around the world.
So that what does the Credit Suisse over here, is it that affected as well?
Not directly yet. Hopefully, we will not feel the fallout from that. When I say we, I mean Credit Suisse Bahamas, but we don't know yet Because now that the government is in helping with the restructuring and UBS is in with taking over and merging or acquiring Credit Suisse, there will be other regulatory and operational and financial changes. It is time will tell whether that will impact the Bahamas in terms of jurisdiction or restructuring. We don't know yet. Okay, so it's a wait and see situation. Like FTX, that is an ongoing saga, and how that will end for us, we still don't know yet. My. Then on top of that, the Silicon Valley Bank failed. Major Silicon Bank. Tons and tons of loans that they made to tech companies and startups. And then suddenly they ran out of money and everybody's looking around as if they didn't realize what was going on. But for those of us who know, we know they know. They know other stuff they're not even saying. So a lot of these major banks, again, in recent times, because of mismanagement, simply that, mismanagement. Giving money to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, giving money to God knows who, under the guise of loans and other investments. It's a long story. Yet they either collapse and people lose their money, profit, and nobody is prosecuted. All of these people involved in the mismanagement of these major banks who are supposed to be well-informed, qualified, and well aware, allowed to run off into the sunlight with whatever benefits they got from the deal, quote unquote, the extent of which is unknown, but certainly real. White collar crime. Okay. So I just kind of throw that. I know there's nothing to do with forced airship, but you know what? It has to do with trust management. And for those of you guys who are retail bankers, private bankers, and trust people, you do well to bear these things in mind. For you will be the ones impacted and your organizations as time goes on. It's an amazing phenomenon. It's kind of like the Bank of the Bahamas deal. Anybody heard about that? The Bank of the Bahamas deal a couple of years ago? Anyone?
No.
I don't think I did.
My. Anybody heard about Resolve Company Limited?
No.
I didn't.
A lot of things going on, isn't it? Well,
Was this when the government had to bail them out?
bail who out?
Is it Bank of the Bahamas?
Yeah, you can say it. It's public knowledge. Don't be bashful, Deandra. Yes, the government had.
I can't remember how it go exactly though, but I heard something about it.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking about Credit Suisse in Switzerland and SVB in the Silicon Valley in the United States. But let's talk about our own country, other than FTX. You know, FTX is the most recent disaster that occurred not only in the Bahamas, but in the Bahamas as well. But once upon a time, not too long ago, 2 years ago, we had a bank called Bank of the Bahamas, our own bank, which has to succeed one way or the other, for obvious reasons, going forward. But it was discovered that Bank of the Bahamas, somebody or group of people at Bank of the Bahamas gave away, let me not say gave away, advanced, let me use a professional term, advanced $500 million in loans to whomever and whomever. And those loans were ultimately not being repaid for one reason or another. And so at some point they were declared to be uncollectible bad debts. It's my foot. How the hell does that happen? And when you're behind a little stinky credit card with $1,000 balance, we were running you down. How did that happen? Anyway. And so, because this $500 million in bad debt was not looking great on the bank's balance sheet and not being collected for reasons not discussed, it was decided that the $500 million would be transferred to a special company called Resolve for collection, whenever that would be. Nobody knows what's really going on in terms of the collection of that $500 million. And so it's sitting in Resolve, quote unquote, being collected, somewhere they say. And as a result, Bank of the Bahamas no longer has to carry that burden on its balance sheet, nor does it have to worry about in-house collection of those funds, which it should have been. That kind of money should never have turned bad to begin with. It only suggests that poor decisions or other decisions are unsuitable were made in giving those facilities. And so they now move forward, hopefully never to do that again. God forbid. Okay? So for those of you who are not aware, in a nutshell, that is our own other than FTX saga that continues to plague us. I don't know who agreed to $500 million in loans that turned out to be uncollectible. We know that 10% is sometimes uncollectible, 5%, 3%, even 15%, sometimes 20%, but not the majority of the portfolio. Now, if I sound like a professional, it's probably because I gave 1 million loans back in the day when I was a youngster. I'm a former Scotia banker, by the way, and I've given all kinds of commercial loans and business loans and consumer loans and mortgage loans. And I cannot think about the many nights I sat up writing and preparing and processing loans. So I'm not speaking from purely an academic perspective. I am speaking purely from a realistic perspective as well. So
So
that's
there
just
was no collateral on any of those loans?
sure. But one of the first things you learn if you get proper training in lending is that collaterals do not pay loans. How about that? Collateral is only there in the event that loans don't get paid. And so we hope if somebody doesn't pay, if there is collateral, that we can sell the collateral, hopefully, for sufficient to cover the loan. Sometimes it doesn't cover the loan, and we still have a balance. So collateral is not a guarantee. And then remember, sometimes loans are not always given to people who what? Any lenders in this room? Well, sometimes loans are given to people who don't qualify.
Sure.
And sometimes those people who don't qualify are our friends. Anybody ever heard about that? No? Okay, so I should quit while I'm ahead. Okay, so you guys get a little bit of insight as professionals and private bankers and trust persons, etc., of some of the realities, some of these things you've not even heard about, but they are there, they are real, and they are not all of them are history. Some of them are current events. Okay, just that you don't run into them because maybe they're not in your sweat at the moment. But these things are real. Okay. I don't know. Does anybody know how many zeros are in $500 million? 500 million? How many zeros? Because sometimes we forget.
8, eh?
8 zeros. Now, imagine if those loans were not bad loans for whatever reason, how many good loans could have been made with $500 million? My. Okay. Just some food for thought for you young professionals. So hopefully your generation will not make the same mistake. All right, so let's talk about forced airship then. I know I digressed, but hopefully that digression was beneficial to somebody in this room because it's very super serious and very practical and very much some things that you might encounter going forward in one form or another. All right. So what do we mean by forced airship, anyone? Forced airship, what's that?
Yes, in the event. Sorry, Melissa.
No, go ahead, babes.
Okay, I don't really know the main by taking a guess. I mean, because I didn't get to read the chapter. But would it mean that, okay, in the event that somebody dies, the next person that would be, I wouldn't say next of kin, but yeah, next of kin, the person or a selected person would be chosen to take over the operations or whatever it was that was left
You know,
by the previous person,
who was the previous person? What do we call that person?
the settler? Or no? Beneficiary?
Getting warm. Look, that's a good start. That's a good start. Does somebody want to add something to that?
So that's where the owner, in certain jurisdictions, they're not allowed to create trust. So their assets has to be passed down to their immediate family. So they have to take care of their not siblings, their children and their spouse. So it would go to their children and spouse regardless of whatever they would like to do by law.
Yes. That is a little more meat to what was said earlier, and together it gives us some idea of how forced airships work. Now, forced airships, the first thing you need to know, if you didn't know, is that forced airships only occur in what we call civil law jurisdictions. Ever heard that word, that expression, civil law jurisdiction?
Mm,
Is that a yes or no? Say-
yes.
Yeah, we have two principal types of jurisdictions at the moment. One is called civil law and one is called common law. The Bahamas is which one?
Common law.
The Bahamas operates under the common law system. If you don't remember that from Trust One, that's another interesting thing to go back, like certainties of a trust. It's one of those fundamental things that you just need to always know. Remember, I told you, old learning is never old. It's always current. Because old learning is the fundamentals, it's the foundation of everything you do going forward. Hmm. If you don't love your spouse now, you may not love them later. Fundamental. If you don't love your children now, you may not love them later. Everything goes back to the fundamentals, the beginning. Isn't that interesting? Okay, I'll tell you what I mean. Sometimes, well, my two sons are now living the hell somewhere. One is in New York, one is in Canada. And I don't know how the hell that happened. Because my plan was for them to go to university and come home. Something else happened during the university years, and so now one is the hell up there, and one is the hell up there. And there's nothing I can do about it. That was their choice as adults. All I can do now is accept it, no matter what I thought or planned. How about that? But what is interesting, sometimes when I see them or talk to them these days, I have to remind myself that they are men. Because sometimes I still see the little boys that I grew up and cuddled and protected and cared for and loved every single day. It's an amazing phenomenon. So yeah, the old stuff is always the new stuff. So we're in a common law jurisdiction, but in civil law jurisdictions, the disposition of assets are determined by law. You don't get to determine that as an individual in civil law jurisdictions. So those of us who are in common law environments, just like democracy, we still don't understand how important it is to be free of government tyranny. My. We still suffer from government tyranny even in democracies in a different way. But imagine those countries that are fascist or communist or dictatorial. Imagine living in those places. So in a civil law jurisdiction, you don't get to I don't care what you made, what you earned, and who you would like to leave it to. You could leave it. You could leave a will, but in a civil law jurisdiction where there's forced heirship, your will means nothing. Your well-structured trust settlement means nothing in those jurisdictions. Nothing. The rule of law will apply as the government of that jurisdiction sees fit. Oh, but this is my stuff. So just don't drop dead. Because once you do, we determine by law where it goes. My. So if you have a spouse, for example, if your spouse is really mean and stinky, as long as you marry on paper, then they are provided for. Even if you don't want to leave anything for that spouse because they were mean to you, they abused you, they. Oh my goodness. Okay, forced airships. An important concept for private banking and trust people to know. Okay. Does anybody have any examples or know of any examples of countries that have civil law jurisdictions or forced airships?
Saudi Arabia,
Saudi Arabia, any others?
France, Spain, and
France, Spain, and
Italy.
Italy. Okay. Any others?
Would China be considered as one?
Yeah, China could be considered. But China is a communist country, so you don't own anything, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So to speak. You don't have private property ownership in a communist environment. How about that? But that piece of property, I pay for that. Pay for that in a democracy, and it's yours. Whatever you want. But in a communist environment, you can't. And in a forced airship civil law environment, you can't leave it to who you want to. It goes to who the law says it goes to. Switzerland is also a civil law jurisdiction. So is Japan, Brazil, in case you didn't know. That's why a lot of trust companies in this jurisdiction have Brazilian clients. Because Brazilian clients are trying to run away from the forced airship rule and try to move their assets out of Brazil and such to avoid their assets being disbursed according to the local law. So if you see a Brazilian client coming to your trust companies, if you want to settle a trust, they're not there just for their health. They're there because they are victims of a civil law jurisdiction. And that applies to all civil law jurisdictions. So you could potentially see clients coming in from any of those places. And that's why a lot of those countries are uptight with jurisdictions like ours and Guernsey and such, and Bermuda and such places, because we allow the clients, their residents, citizens to come over, to settle a trust so that they can give their assets to who they want to give it to, not who the state says it should go to. My. All right, very important stuff to know. Are there any civil law jurisdictions in the US? Anyone that you're aware of? Typically, no. The US operates under common law just as we do. Where do we get our common law background from, class? We in the Bahamas.
The UK?
UK,
Of course. Where do you think the United States got their common law background from?
the UK.
Of
Okay.
course, You do realize that other than the Indians who are running around in some parts of the US, that the first settlers in the US were UK citizens. You realize that, do you? Probably not. Then. Yeah, they were called the Puritans, and they were looking for religious and tax relief from the UK government. So they left the UK and landed as Puritans in the United States. That's why a lot of things in the United States appear to be very similar in some cases to the UK, because the original settlers are from the UK. It's just that over time, they came up with their own thing to the extent that they're like, man, we're not even related to the UK at all. But that's not true. That's one of the reasons why the US is still and currently a common law jurisdiction. My. Lots of things come up when you wake up out of bed and sit in the classroom. So, welcome to forced airship. And one of the problems with forced airship is that it causes citizens of those countries not only to seek to get away from forced airship rules, but also to seek asset protection in jurisdictions like ours as well. So those are the two things we're going to talk about today that have something to do with private banks and trust companies all the time, whether you're aware of it or not yet. If you're not, you will become forced airship citizens seeking jurisdictions to settle trusts so that they can leave their assets to whom they want or have it disbursed to whom they want. And certainly to seek asset protection for very specific reasons. Okay? And that's basically the two key things that we're going to be discussing today. How to set up these trusts for asset protection and to remind us and show us what really goes on in a forced airship environment. All right, so let's begin. I think I've rattled on for far too long already. Okay, who wants to start the reading today? Volunteers.
I'll read.
Okay, let it rip, Melissa. Start
Forced
it.
airship.
Yeah,
Sorry?
forced. Go ahead.
Forced airship laws are prevalent in civil law jurisdictions, France, Spain, and Italy, and Islamic countries like Saudi Arabia. In these jurisdictions, it is the view that a deceased is required to make adequate provisions for their dependents. A person who is domiciled in a forced airship regime cannot dispose of his property in a trust or a will as he/she wishes without consideration of the other spouses and children's interest in the property. The individual is mandated by law to dispose of his property and wealth after his lifetime in accordance with forced airship legislation. There is no recognition of total freedom of testation. Due to the restrictions imposed by such laws, many wealthy persons seek to make arrangements offshore from their jurisdictions to enable them to dispose of the property as they wish, notwithstanding the existence of forced airship laws in their country. Oftentimes, countries with forced airship laws would attempt to impose such laws on the worldwide assets of their citizens. However, the Bahamas has enacted laws to allow foreign persons to create legitimate Bahamian trusts in order to assist such persons in planning their wealth as they wish. Significant powers are reserved to the settler under Section 3 of the Trustee Act 1998 as amended to allow greater flexibility in creating trusts which meet the wealth planning needs and financial goals of foreign settlers. Under Section 3, settlers may wish to reserve significant powers to themselves in the administration and management of the trust, while still ensuring that the legal validity of the trust can withstand an attack from beneficiaries in foreign jurisdictions who may wish to invalidate the trust due to the forced airship laws in their country.
Melissa, before you go on, whether you're aware of it or not, what we're saying here is that even where a settler can come to offshore jurisdictions like the Bahamas and legally establish a trust, if beneficiaries under a forced airship civil law jurisdiction find out that such a thing has happened, you should and can expect that those beneficiaries will bring that trust in the offshore jurisdiction under attack. What would be their argument? Under civil law jurisdictions, this does not happen, and whatever assets are sitting in that trust in the jurisdiction are legally ours and are to be distributed according to our laws. Okay, that can potentially happen. That's what that paragraph section is referring to. Okay, all right, keep going.
Question. So where they say the settler may wish to reserve significant powers to themselves in the administration and management of the trust. How? I thought they shouldn't be managing the trust.
Well, it's so nice to see you speaking out of the box so early in the morning. Good question. And here's the reason for that. Under traditional trust settlements, that would never be allowed. You get that? That's under traditional trust settlement back in the old days and still in some countries like UK. However, under modern trust law in offshore jurisdictions like ours, we have enacted new trust legislation that allows settlers to be settlers and to also participate in the affairs of the trust, contrary to the old traditional trust establishments. Okay, that's why it's currently allowed. And that doesn't mean, though, that because it's allowed under modern legislation, that it does not come into question. It comes into question a lot. Typically, settlers should not be involved in the trust once those assets have been settled. That's how it used to be for hundreds of years. That's the ideal situation. However, see, modern trust law, just like other modern things, we say we're changing from the old-fashioned, I don't have to say good morning anymore. Who the hell wants to say it? To, I'll just walk straight past you. That's modern stuff. I don't need to dress like that anymore, like modestly. That's old school. I'll dress how I feel. That's modern stuff, they say. So it's the same principles with regards to trust. Under modern trust law, we're now allowing settlers to be involved in the trust contrary to what it has always been. And I can assure you, it has created some modern problems as well. Just other modern things have created some modern problems. That's a good question. Something for trust administrators and trustees to think about. Problem is, because trust companies are continuously looking to take on new clients, many of them in our jurisdiction, modern trust law jurisdictions, Bahamas, Cayman, BVI, Guernsey, Bermuda, these places, they oftentimes do not turn away these kinds of trust arrangements where the settler wants to be involved with the trust because they don't want to turn away the business. Because they know that if they say, we'd rather not do it this way, we'd rather use the traditional methods and have the settler not being involved, they know if they say that, then the settler is going to do what? Anyone? If you decline them, what they're going to do?
Not establish a trust.
Yes, they will, but where will they establish it? With the competition. Remember? If you don't do it, what are they going to do? Go to some other modern trust law jurisdiction, like the BVI, Caymans, or some Cayman, who will do it. I know a lot of things going on in the real world. Good question. Okay, but that's how it works, and that's the current situation. It doesn't mean that we cannot do a traditional trust anymore. It doesn't even mean that we should not do a traditional trust. And what is a traditional trust? Where the settler, once settled, stays out of it. because now it's the trustee's responsibility. That's what the old traditional real trust, how it works. And that's usually the better method. Under modern trust law, we sometimes allow the settler to come in and get involved somehow in investments and making decisions and all this crazy stuff. Sometimes even running the trustee, which of course can cause the trust to come under question as being a sham trust, by the way. But hey, welcome to modernity, the modern world. Just how we talk differently, act differently, dress differently. The trust world has its modern version as well. And that's it. Despite the pain and suffering that comes out of it sometimes as a result. All right, keep going. Good question.
Additionally, the restrictions in Section 83 of the Trustee Act 1998 with regard to the information that beneficiaries may exercise their right over are another important resource in combating attacks from foreign beneficiaries who are intent on challenging the legal validity of Bahamian trusts created and funded by foreign settlers. The fixed inheritance rights which exist under forced heirship laws supersede the testamentary and other dispositions of the settler which may be made under a will, particularly if such provisions are contrary to forced heirship laws. Forced heirship laws, through their worldwide prohibition on the disposition of a foreign settler's property, may also assist creditors of the deceased settler to receive payment of their debts before the final distribution or probate of the property. In considering the disposition of assets under forced heirship and inheritance laws, one must also consider the fact that certain estate and/or inheritance taxes may be levied on the estate of the deceased settler or on the inheritance of the beneficiaries. A tax levied on the estate of a deceased person is called an estate tax. The estate tax may be a percentage of the value of the total assets of the deceased person. It allows only the estate of the deceased person to be taxed whilst inheritance of the beneficiaries are free of taxes. Conversely, a tax which is imposed on the heirs or beneficiaries of a deceased person's estate is known as an inheritance tax. The inheritance tax is levied on the gifts or bequests granted to the beneficiaries and/or will, or under the inheritance laws, and must be paid upon their receipt of the same.
Before you go on, let me ask you guys a question. As trust and private money people, to be or not to be, do we have estate and inheritance taxes in the Bahamas?
No, not to my knowledge.
No, we don't. That is one of the reasons why jurisdictions like ours continue to be attractive to those countries, citizens who do have estate and inheritance taxes. For example, if somebody dies in the US, for example, the estate tax on the total assets could be as high as maybe 30 or 40%. Same as in the UK and other European countries. In some places, it's as high as 50%. So if you die and leave an estate of $10 million and the estate tax is 50%, how much do you have to pay? The government.
5 million.
Does that sound exciting to you?
Not at all.
No. That's why they keep running the trust company.
So question, when they create the trust in the Bahamas and they don't have to pay the taxes, right?
Right.
So the trust would then disperse it to the beneficiaries. But what I don't understand is when they disperse it to the beneficiaries and now it's legally their own, wouldn't they still be taxed, or would it stay underneath the company that they created under the Bahamas so that they won't have to face any taxes?
Another good question, which is exactly why it's great to roll out of bed and still sit in these sessions. Here's how it works. On the estate tax side, those jurisdictions that have estate taxes, which is not ours, we have no estate taxes. So under our jurisdiction, if somebody dies, no tax is levied on the value of that estate. If you are in a jurisdiction where there are estate taxes like the UK and Europe and the US and other countries, in South America and Middle East and all this kind of crazy stuff, when you die, whatever that rate is, you're required to pay that amount. The example I gave is 50%, $5 million out of your pocket. People are not happy with that. All that money goes directly to the government immediately. You keep the rest. If you don't like it, jump off the bridge and drop dead. That's the law. Now, in terms of beneficiaries, when dispositions are made to beneficiaries, depending on which jurisdiction that beneficiary is in, they will be required to declare that disposition as income and therefore pay the relevant inheritance or income tax that is applicable in that jurisdiction. So if a beneficiary is in a jurisdiction like the Bahamas, then they have no income tax to pay on it if it's income, and they have no inheritance tax to pay if it's an inheritance. However, if you in the Bahamas make a disposition to a beneficiary in a non-tax-free environment, anywhere in the world, wherever they are, they will have to declare that as income or inheritance tax and pay the relevant taxes, period. If they don't, they will be in violation of that law of that jurisdiction and may even end up in prison for violating the law. That's how it works.
So regardless, they still would have to pay taxes.
Well, not everybody declares the income they receive. How's that?
Okay.
Absolutely. Just like not all companies declare for VAT purposes in the Bahamas. Did you know that? They don't declare everything all the time. You know that?
I'm sure.
People lie about what's going on. Companies lie, governments lie, churches lie. All kinds of interesting things are going on.
Mr. Wilkinson, then those persons, the funds will have to then remain in the Bahamas for them not to pay taxes on it, right? Because I mean, once it leaves.
Yes, if they don't want to pay taxes on it, it remains here. However, because it remains here, doesn't mean that they're not liable. It just means that if it remains here, they don't have, they don't have to literally pay it.
Right.
If the disposition is made to them and it stays here, which is what a lot of them do. They leave it in our in jurisdictions like ours, and when they need money, just go to the ATM and take it off. Understand?
Right, but even if they were to declare it in the US, let's say if it's a US person, they would still have to pay taxes, right? Once it's declared.
Of course, even if they leave it here, but they receive it as income, they are supposed by law to declare it and pay the taxes. And then they can do whatever they want to do with it. Leave it here, take it over to the US, go anywhere they want once they've declared and paid the taxes. The problem is that the American, Canadian, and European and other governments have is that their citizens don't always declare. And you can see why. They don't want to pay the taxes. They want to keep their money. They don't want to be giving their money to the government all the time, they say. Even though you're caught, it actually end up in prison.
You know what's so weird in the US is like they have so much free will. Like when we come in from away, we have to come through customs. We have to declare, right? The US citizens doesn't have to stop to customs and declare anything. They want them to. The honest person would stop to the counter and declare, but they can just stroll straight past. They don't have to go to that department at all.
No, they don't. That is one of the things. But there's a reason why Bahamians have to declare. Anybody knows the reason, the primary reason?
They want all our money.
Let's see, there you say, there you go. That's what it is. Folks are ducking, making declarations around the world because they don't want, yeah, they said the government wants their money and they don't want the government to have their money, even though it's the law. Okay? Uh, but you know, we know all about laws. Laws are always violated for one reason or another. And in this case, people don't want to give too much of their money or any of it back to the government. They want to keep all of it. Again, even people who make tons and tons of money, in fact, looks like people who make the most money want to declare the least, and they're the ones who can pay the most. And those of us who make the least money, who should be trying to save it, we always get caught up in the declaration somehow, and we have to pay out of our little itsy bitsy whatever it is a year we make, given the tax environment we're in. Okay, every tax in the Bahamas, for example, is a regressive tax. Who gets to pay the majority of it all the time? Poor, hardworking, middle class people and below. Who gets away with being able to go around the system? People who have lots of money, same as it is everywhere in the world, depending on where you are. Yeah, but yeah, but the reason why we have to declare is because coming back in the Bahamas, they know that Bahamians, notice when Americans come to the Bahamas, they don't declare, they just walk straight through, correct?
Yeah.
We don't bother them either because they're tourists. They don't live here. They're not resident. The reason why residents have to declare, because when residents travel, we buy stuff. We buy stuff that attract duty, don't we? Don't we?
We do.
Yes.
And because they attract duty, according to our laws, any goods coming into the Bahamas that attract duty, duty must be paid so that the government can get the taxes on those goods by law. That's why we stop Bahamians. And that's why we don't stop tourists coming in. In the US, customs duty is not a revenue facility, not in that form, people coming back home. But for the Bahamas, it's big business because Bahamians spend tons, millions of dollars annually on external goods, in case you didn't know. You might spend 300 when you multiply by the amount of Bahamians who travel per year and the number of times they travel, and those who are in commercial business who are buying goods to resell, straw work or any other goods and whatever, you're talking millions and millions of dollars a year. That's why they stop us. And even then, Bahamians still find ingenious ways to not pay duty if they could. Because even though we can collect duty back when we resell the goods, if you're a business, even businesses still don't want to pay it, even though they could collect it back from consumers in their final selling price. My. Lots of things going on. Okay, good question. Keep going.
Hold on, sorry, 1 second. Conversely, a tax which is imposed on the heirs or beneficiaries of a deceased person's estate is known as an inheritance tax. The inheritance tax is levied on the gifts or bequests granted to the beneficiaries under will or under the inheritance laws and must be paid upon the receipt of the same. In most jurisdictions, an estate or an inheritance tax may be levied, but not both, which will make it inequitable to double tax the estate of a deceased person and the heirs of the estate. Another consideration that must be made in relation to the application of forced heirship laws is the fact that Bahamian trust companies with parent companies, branches, or affiliate companies in jurisdictions with such laws and in the domicile of the assets of their foreign settlers may be penalized for non-compliance with its laws and compelled to provide information on its clients, albeit reluctantly.
In for one more minute again. That's you guys. You guys meaning these jurisdictions that we are in. So, trust companies in this jurisdiction, even though you may not be directly involved in a tax situation, because the parent company is involved in a tax situation outside of the jurisdiction, the jurisdictions that we are in might be called upon and to some extent even penalized if we don't produce certain information with regards to any issues coming up for tax resolution. Okay, so we're not out of the woods, even though we may not be directly involved. We don't call ourselves a tax haven anymore. We're in an offshore jurisdiction where we don't require taxes to be paid. As a result of that, tax countries call us tax havens. Anybody knows what a haven is? Can somebody look up the word haven? Google it. Haven. What is that? Tax haven, safe haven. What does the word haven mean?
A place of safety or refuge.
Place of safety or refuge. That's why they used to call jurisdictions like ours havens. How does safety or refuge relate to that name that we used to have? Why do you think those major countries, tax countries around the world call jurisdictions like ours havens, tax havens in relation to that?
Because they have so many different taxes that they would have to pay. So by transferring it over here, it's like a safe place for them not to be taxed.
Absolutely. So in case you didn't even think about the word tax haven before, welcome to what used to be, and in some cases still indirectly, the situation in offshore jurisdictions. Now, those countries with high taxes who cause citizens to run over and try to seek low taxes or no taxes, they have spoken and referred to tax havens always in a negative way, like it's a dirty word, And that, of course, is to discourage offshore jurisdiction from entertaining clients who come over. The problem is, offshore jurisdictions are not responsible for their citizens. It's their citizens who make the decision to seek relief, even if they're breaking the law. It's their citizens' responsibility to make declarations, not the offshore jurisdictions. Yet, in recent years, offshore jurisdictions are now being penalized by FATF and others if we do not declare. So they're making us do it now. And if you don't do it, they're not relying on their citizens anymore, their own people, as it should be. They're making offshore jurisdictions do it. And if you don't do it, we'll beat you with a whip. And that whip will be, we'll cut off all of your corresponding banking facilities. And therefore, you will not be able to do any international business. How about that? Go and plant bananas or something. Sorry, just say it so you could remember. But that is the nature of the issue concerning tax havens, in case you may never even have thought about it at all. Or maybe nobody ever even said anything to you about it, surprisingly, at all. All right, keep going.
The Trust Choice of Governing Law Act 1989 and Trust Choice of Governing Law Amendment Act, as amended, both enable Bahamian Trust to address and overcome attacks by foreign beneficiaries from jurisdictions with forced heirship laws. The laws are specifically designed to address conflict of laws in civil law jurisdictions, which may affect or invalidate dispositions in Bahamian trusts. The Trust Choice of Governing Law Act 1989 allows a foreign settler, whether he is resident in the Bahamas or not, to declare the laws of the Bahamas as the proper or governing law of trust which he creates, and such a declaration will be legally valid, effective, and conclusive, notwithstanding the forced heirship or other laws within its country regarding the disposition of assets within the trust.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you for that. Introducing us to the nature and the business of forced heirship, and ending, of course, on the choice of governing law. If you've never heard that expression before, you're hearing it now. And essentially, it allows trustees to declare the Bahamas as their choice of governing law, which means that any trust that is settled in the Bahamas would be governed by Bahamian law and no other law in any other country. Of course, there's always a problem somewhere, and while that is fantastic for foreign settlers, if a foreign settler has real estate that is not in the Bahamas and they declare as the Bahamas as the governing law, they will still run into trouble because you cannot move real estate and run to some other country. Once it's in that jurisdiction, it's there and you're stuck. So assets in the form of real estate could be tricky. And of course, you might even have guessed by now that if a foreign settler has real estate in a civil law jurisdiction, even though the Bahamas is the governing law of choice, that real estate will not be released by the civil law jurisdiction or any jurisdiction for that matter. And so therefore, the settler cannot insist that that right to that property be transferred to the governing jurisdiction such as the Bahamas. Of course, under those conditions, the settler is not totally powerless. Can anybody think about what the settler can do under those conditions? In the case of real estate, if it's cash and investments, hey, that's not a problem. That's outside. We can control that. But what about real estate that's inside the country? Does the trustee have any option at all? Because you can't move the real estate and the country's not going to release it to the local jurisdiction in an offshore jurisdiction. They're not going to do it.
Why would it be included in the deed to begin with? Why would it be included in the trust?
It might be included in the trust so that all the assets of the trust are declared and known. You see my point?
Mm.
And sometimes people get lucky. For some reason, they might know somebody in government. They might have had a relationship with somebody who might allow them to get away with something that the law does provide. How about that? So all kinds of other things still happen. And so, yeah, it's first of all to make sure that the assets are all known into the trust. And even though you may not have governing jurisdiction, in some cases, you may attempt to get jurisdiction and get lucky. But most times with real estate, you won't. But the settler has an option. They could sell the property, can they not? Can they not?
Yeah,
Yeah. Sell the property and put the money where?
in the Bahamian trust as a
Yeah.
capital.
Not only in the Bahamian Trust.
No,
but
as
now-
incoming.
Well, remember our discussion that if you have discretion, you can put some in.
Both.
Yeah, but in the sale of property is a capital item, so trustees are likely to put the money where?
In capital.
Yeah, unless some income people start arguing like, how the hell you could put the whole 50 million in capital? What about us? We need to eat. Then you have a big fight, and then the trustee might say, you know what, the hell with that, I need a headache. Put 10 million in income. See my point?
Hmm.
But this is the non-textbook side of things. Okay?
Ms. Wilkinson, I have a question.
Yes.
So if I have a trust that is in the Bahamas,
Mhm.
because I am from an airship jurisdiction,
Or-
and I sell the property that's in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
How do I
Okay.
get the money out?
Well, it depends. See, that's the other thing. Remember, when you do a transaction in these countries that you have property in, for example, you have to look at all the variables. What are the tax implications? What are the rules of sale? And what are the laws governing taking the money out of the country? So see, yes, you have the option to sell, but you can't just say, I'll sell because I feel like it. Well, you could feel like it, But you better find out what the laws and the rules are governing that whole process before you even get to making an attempt to sell. Because sometimes some countries may not allow you to sell. Or if you sell, they allow you only to take out a certain percentage of the money. And the rest must stay, whether you like it or not. You're gonna, oh, this is my property, I work for this, I inherit this, I bought this, they don't care. The law is the law. That's why we in the Bahamas don't realize how fortunate we are. We could still get away with all kinds of crazy stuff. We could even call our prime minister stupid, whoever they might be, and not go to prison because we have freedom of speech still. Stinking crime or whatever we want to say. I don't like that because we still have the freedom to say it. But in other countries, we could buy our property and sell it however we want, do whatever we want. See that? We take it for granted because we don't have those restrictions. We don't have that pain and suffering. And we still don't understand how free we really are, apparently. But we just need to look at some of these jurisdictions, even in the context of the discussion of this trust session, to see how horrible and restrictive and painful it could be. And that's only in the nature of trust. Imagine all the other areas of life that we take for granted, that other countries and people and their citizens, man, they have no idea what it is to be feeling free for real. So, yeah, you could sell it, but it may not be that easy, depending on the jurisdiction. So you need to find out what those terms and conditions are before you sell and see if you can live with them. So because one jurisdiction might say, yeah, you can sell it. If they say yes, you can sell it, but you can only take out half of the money. Then you might say, you know what? Half is better than nothing under these conditions and sell. Or they may say, yeah, you can sell it, but we won't allow you to send anything out. You have to use it here. Mr. Shavosky. See what I mean? So, for example, in the Bahamas, similar but different note. Does anybody have any idea how much money is remitted from the Commonwealth of the Bahamas annually? You know what I mean by remitted?
Sent out the country
Sent out of the country where?
to the US?
What US?
No?
Not only the US? Where else?
Mm, unsanctioned countries? I don't know.
I know,
Everywhere.
I know. See, folks, it's amazing. Yeah, you youngsters have a whole lot to get on with, I can assure you. Just throwing it out. Let me tell you something. Every foreigner who works in the Bahamas sends money out of the country, don't they?
Oh, yes, yes.
Where do they send it?
To their family, to take care of their family,
Well, one of the
whichever country they're from.
reasons is to take care of their family, but that's not the only reason. That's just the best one to give, isn't it?
Yeah, what to save because value would be more, so they would send it to like their account.
Not only the value is more, they just send it to look after family. They send it to save on their home country account. They send it for a lot of reasons. The problem is, why are we allowing them to send all of this money outside of the Commonwealth? Are we really that affluent, that rich, that we could allow millions and millions of dollars to leave every year without any restriction? Really? Okie dokie. What can I say?
So
Just-
what kind of restrictions are you saying they should probably pay something against the funds that are leaving?
I know we're so used to things the way they are, we don't even think about the consequences. Do you know that every dollar that leaves the Bahamas never comes back?
I can believe that, yeah.
I'm telling you that as a fact. So here's what we can do. If we allow them to send money to look after their families, which is why they're working here in the first place, but that's not the only reason. But let's say that's the humanitarian reason. What we could do, if we want to, is say to them, you're allowed to send money out of the Bahamas to your families, but only 50% of what you earn. The rest stays in the Bahamas. You have to spend it and use it here. So it continues to circulate here and boost our economy. How does that sound?
Makes a lot of sense.
The problem is, why am I the only genius in the room?
I'm sure others have thought about it, but how?
Thinking about anything never gets anything done until you actually.
That probably will circulate for a very long time before they make a decision on it.
It has been 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any ideas what has left the country in 50 years? You guys have no idea, okay? Unfortunately. And nobody seems to be particularly concerned for some reason. But I just thought I'd drop one more nugget to you youngsters who will have to determine the direction of things. How's that? All right, thank you so much, Melissa, for that. Do we have anybody who can help Melissa along? Another? Is there one more?
The Trust Choice of Governing Law Act 1989 allows a foreign settler, whether he is resident in the Bahamas or not, to declare the laws of the Bahamas as the proper or governing law of a trust which he creates, and such a declaration will be legally valid, effective, and conclusive, notwithstanding the forced heirship or other laws within his country regarding the disposition of assets within the trust. The Act specifically has provisions which address the importance of Bahamian law being the proper law of the trust. It states primarily that the original proper law of the trust may be changed to or from the laws of the Bahamas in certain circumstances where the trust instrument so provides. It also states that where a term of the trust allows certain aspects of the trust or the administration of the trust to be governed by Bahamian law, that term would be conclusive evidence that the settler intended the laws of the Bahamas to govern the trust. Trust assets such as real property in the Bahamas and personal property located elsewhere in the world will be governed by Bahamian law under a Bahamian trust and not the forced heirship laws of another country. It should be noted, however, that under international private law, as it relates to real property in any country or jurisdiction, the law of lex situs, that is, law where the real property is situated, governs, so there may be specific local laws within a settler's country which may be applicable to foreign real property assets within a Bahamian trust.
Now,
To
before
overcome,
you go on, Leandro, let's stop to that lexitus, the Latin expression. Lex in Latin means law, and situs means situation or location in Latin, okay? From which we get a lot of our English. Now, notice what should be noted. Despite the choice of governing law under international private law, this is some little other action going on. It is generally, for those who are aware of it and know it, it is generally understood that where real estate is involved in a particular jurisdiction, even if you have a choice of law in another jurisdiction, to govern your trust. That under international private law, you should expect that that property will not be available for disposition despite your choice of law. In particular, in relation to lex-situs or real estate location, okay? Clearly, because real estate is real estate, it's stuck wherever it is, not easily transferable. In order to get the value out of that, you have to sell it and then do what you need to do with the liquid part of the asset or proceeds of the sale. But the real estate itself, it's not that easy to get access to. All right, keep going, Deandra.
To overcome any impediments such as the law of the lex situs and other conflicts of laws, trust officers and wealth managers normally recommend that foreign assets be converted to Bahamian assets before being placed into a Bahamian trust. A Bahamian company, normally an IBC, is created to purchase the foreign property in exchange for shares in the company. The shares in the Bahamian company, which represent ownership interests in the foreign assets, are then transferred to a Bahamian trust, which is governed by Bahamian law. Additionally, under the Act, any questions in relation to a trust where Bahamian law is the governing law or the disposition of property within such a trust shall be determined in accordance with the laws of the Bahamas. These questions may include questions regarding 1, the legal hold on,
Validity,
thanks, of the trust. 2, the capacity of the settlor. 3, the nature and extent of the powers within the trust. 4, the disposition of trust assets. And 5, the administration of the trust. The Act enables a foreign settlor to make provisions for his spouse during his lifetime and for his children after his death, if he so desires. He is also able.
before you go on, let me just make this connection one more time. The provision for his spouse during his lifetime or her lifetime is what we refer to as what kind of beneficiary? During your lifetime.
In vitro?
Yeah, but we use typically in practice another word for lifetime benefits. Income,
Income,
benefit, yeah. And then after his death and the death of his wife, it goes to his children. Who do they become?
the remainder.
Absolutely. Okay. Just keeping you guys connected, that you know that these words are not stuff that we pull out of our hat just to discuss trust issues. All right, keep going, Deandra.
Settlers may or may not wish to provide for beneficiaries after their death, which they may have already made provision during their lifetime by way of a monetary investment or a disposition of real property.
One more point before you go on. Sorry. Notice, see that simple paragraph? Settlers may not wish to make provisions. So every time you pick up a situation, you say, he didn't leave anything for his children? Well, maybe he already did, correct? According to this paragraph, he obviously already did, didn't he? Does anybody see that? Settlers may or may not wish to provide for beneficiaries after their death.
Death, yes, he did.
Because they already did. Because sometimes settlers, let's, for example, if your parents own a piece of property, they may decide they're not going to wait until they die. They're going to give it to you while they're alive. So if they give it to you while they're alive, then what do you expect when they're gone? They already gave it to you. And so if they leave the other $5,000 to someone else, they didn't leave me any of the $5,000. Give me a break. They already gave you the property as a gift in their lifetime. And so there's nothing they need to leave. You already got more than your share, and sometimes more than the person who got a little blah, blah, blah. That's the point. So because somebody's not left in the will doesn't mean they've been left out. It could have been that they've already been gifted during the lifetime of the settlor or the testator. See? Which some of you may end up doing in your lifetime. Let me give my child this thing before I go, because I don't know what's going to happen when I gone. Or the bastard is going to wait until I go. Don't rush me. It's all up to you, a settlor or a testator. If you're in a common law jurisdiction, of course. All right, keep going.
The Trust Choice of Governing Law Amendment Act 1996 helped to clarify the definition of heirship rights under the original act and invalidated the enforcement of foreign judgments relating to inheritance and matrimonial rights under forced heirship laws in the Bahamas. Recent amendments to the Trust Choice of Governing Law Amendment Act 2016 provides for enhanced protection for trusts from attempted enforcement of judgments arising from family disputes and forced heirship rules.
Keep going.
Asset Protection Trusts. Settlers may establish trusts known as Asset Protection Trusts in the Bahamas. These trusts are created by the settlor upon transfer of his assets to the trust, subject to the terms of the trust to protect his assets normally from future or potential creditors. The Fraudulent Dispositions Act 1991 was enacted to protect asset protection trusts in the Bahamas from claims from future or unexpected creditors who may wish to attack such trusts. The Fraudulent Dispositions Act makes provision that every disposition which is transferred to a trust with the intent to defraud or at an undervalue will be voidable at the instance of the creditor who has been duly prejudiced. The aggrieved creditor has the burden of providing that the settlor of the asset protection trust intended to defraud him or it and is required to commence legal action within 2 years of the date of the disposition. Therefore, to successfully prove the creditor's case and for the transfer or disposition of property into the Bahamian Asset Protection Trust to be voidable, the following requirements must be met. 1, the settlor's debt or liability to the creditor must have existed at the time of the transfer or disposition of the property. 2, the transfer must have been at an undervalue. 3, there must have been an intent to defraud the creditor when the transfer or disposition was made. 4, the creditor must have been prejudiced due to the transfer or disposition. And 5, the creditor must bring an action within 2 years from the transfer of disposition. If successful, the creditor will effectively have the transfer or disposition set aside and made voidable in relation to the Bahamian Asset Protection Trust.
Thank you very much, Deandra.
You're welcome.
Another mouthful of stuff that you really, really do need to know. Everything that you've done so far up to this very moment, you really, really need to know. But you can see in the work that you do in trust and estate management, or you're setting out to do sometime in the future, is a very convoluted task with all kinds of things going on, depending on what aspect of the trust administration and management you're involved in. And so we see at the end of this discussion, the issue of governing law and the problems connected to real estate. And then finally, we see that there's a whole other kind of trust that can be set up and often is set up in the Bahamas and other offshore jurisdictions called the Asset Protection Trust, primarily to protect against predators. Of course, in the modern trust world, Asset Protection Trust is set up for some other reasons as well, some fine and some questionable, but primarily when these things started out back in the day, it was designed to protect the settlers' assets from predators who may be seeking to move in and dispose of them for legitimate or not so legitimate reasons. We in the Bahamas and other offshore jurisdictions make provisions for these asset protection trusts. However, we have also come up with the Fraudulent Disposition Act of 1991. And this act is to make sure that settlers do not, on purpose, set up an asset protection trust to deliberately avoid paying their debts, their due and legal debts. And so this particular act has the provisions where if a creditor can prove under these 5 points that the settler has done any of those individually or together as a group, then under the act, a creditor can then have the asset protection trust under our law, the Fraudulent Disposition Act, set aside, and then the creditor can legally move in on those assets, take possession of them, and pay off any debts that a settler might have. Okay? So yes, the asset protection trust is designed to protect assets from creditors, but not to protect settlers from fraudulent activity themselves. Everybody get that?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So having said that, I'll leave you with that mouthful of all kinds of this and that for just this morning session alone. And so for the next few moments that we have, let's go back to the self-assessment questions from Unit 8 first. And then we'll look at those from Unit 9. And then we'll be done. You guys can go back and snooze for a little bit more or hit the road. All right, let's go back to Unit 8, special assets that we discussed on Thursday and underlying companies. Okay. Question 1, define a special asset. Anyone? What is a special asset?
Those are assets which require specialized skills and management, and they also have special features.
Thank you very much. Couldn't put it better myself. Okay. Couldn't put it better. The answer wasn't 100% clear. So you had to, okay, based on the reading, that's what special assets are. So yeah, well done. All right, number 2, name some types of special assets.
Precious stones, artwork, coins, jewelry, artifacts.
Yes. Okay, absolutely. Number 3, what are some of the features of special assets? Some of the unique features. One of them
They
is,
liquid for once,
yeah, they are illiquid. That is a major feature. What do we mean by they are illiquid?
not easily converted to cash.
That they're not easily converted to cash. Might eventually decide to sell one, but it's not going to be an overnight affair, for sure. There are a lot of things involved in getting it sold. All right, anything else that is unique? I know the answer wasn't really jumping out except for
They need special keeping in order to keep the like special locations or atmosphere in order to keep them in top condition.
yes, to be secured in very unique places in order to keep them. By all means. Anything else?
They might inquire insurance.
Yes, for sure. Well, that'll come up soon, but yes, that is unique, but not as unique as illiquid and careful and special storage. What about restrictive access? That's a special case because all the traditional assets, if you want your cash, you go to the bank. If you want your securities, you go to the stock market. You can find stuff easily. You don't have any restrictions in accessing them and buying and selling them. But special assets, they have more restrictive security. If you want to see that rare artifact, you don't just walk in and say, I'm here to see it. Not that simple. You have to do all kinds of crazy stuff. And let's not forget the other unique thing about special assets is that they have to be accessed, filmed, documented, catalog. Very careful steps, one by one, because you could have 3 artifacts that are worth $300 million, which means like, oh my God, each of them on average is 100 million. So you have to make sure you document that somewhere permanent so you can find it, catalog it. If there are any serial numbers, write it down. Any special marks, make a note. Because if you miss something, that could be $100 million problem, or worse, a $300 million problem for the trust company. My. As you can see, that's one of the reasons why we were told in our text on Thursday, a lot of trustees don't want to mess with those special assets, just like a lot of people don't want to mess with their special needs children. Did you know that? Some people, when they have special needs children, they mistreat them, or they don't give them the best life they could, or they give their children, special needs children, to someone else, or they put them in an institution, because special needs children are like special assets. They require unique things. They require more love and attention than anybody else, than regular children. They require more protection than regular children. They require, everything is different, just like special assets. So just like how some trustees are not happy to take on special assets, man, a lot of parents, when they have a special needs children, they go, oh God, why did you do this? And nothing to do with God. All right, we still have to do what we have to do. They're our children. All right, number 5. 4, what are some of the considerations that a trustee must make in accepting to administer a trust with special assets? What are some of the considerations?
The cost associated with the maintenance,
Or maintenance,
storage,
storage,
that type of thing.
accurate recording, or accurate records. Not forget that. With regards to loss or damage, very important. What about valuation? Why is that so important? Valuation of assets.
Because you would need to know how much it's valued at so that you could get proper insurance coverage.
Absolutely. And of course, those of you who were listening and read, you would also remember that in addition to getting proper insurance coverage, you need to find somebody who's properly qualified too.
Value it.
Yeah, because not everybody says that they qualify. Some of them are fakes, aren't they?
Yes.
Yes. Just how we have fake everything else. We have fake valuators. Or we may have real valuators who under or overvalue for one reason or another. For example, if they're corrupt and you say to them, I know that you're qualified, I'll give you an extra $100,000 if you overvalue this for me, or undervalue it. And if they have no ethics and professional way of doing things, then it's 100,000. It's sick there. That's a lot of money. And so if they're corrupt, even though they're qualified, they'll still do the wrong thing. That is an inherent risk, in case you didn't know. What about marketability? Why is that a consideration for those handling special assets? Marketability. That's another one. Why?
In the event that it needs to be sold, there needs to be a market for it.
There needs to be a market, and markets are few and far between. You have to find and know the right people who may want to buy, and they may not want to buy when you want to sell, and they may not want to buy at the amount you want to sell. And because you want to sell, they may want to stock you down to a price that's lower than you are willing to say. Marketability. Just because it's a high value item doesn't mean you can get rid of it whenever you want. Not that easy. Okay. And then finally, let's not forget the risk of theft, loss, or damage to these high value items. We have to constantly, as the trustee, be thinking about that, because somebody wants to steal it, somebody might break it, somebody might damage it. Yes, we have the insurance, but it doesn't matter. Insurance is one aspect of it down the road. But that doesn't mean we want it to be stolen because we have insurance or damaged. Because theft and damage and all this kind of stuff is a whole other problem. And let us not forget the other consideration, the taxes that are related to the special assets that you might have. Are there any tax connections to them? Do you have to pay any kind of tax for holding them? That's a consideration. Okay, because sometimes you pay taxes when you realize from the sale, and other times you may have to pay taxes on unrealized gains. So if the asset increase in value, but you still have it, you have to pay taxes on the increase in value. How about that? Governments have all kinds of ways of getting some of it. All right, number 5, the ultimate liability for the management of commercial real estate assets in a trust lies with whom?
The trustee.
Trustee,
Always, always. Just like investments. Investments, you may delegate it to investment managers, but the responsibility is still the trustees. Doesn't matter how many qualified investors you have, how many qualified anybody that you may hire as a trustee. Whatever goes wrong or right is still ultimately your responsibility as a trustee. Number 6, what are some of the challenges of managing commercial real estate in an asset of a trust? Some of the challenges managing real estate. Commercial real estate. Okay, taxes. One of the issues you have to deal with, commercial taxes. Something we call levies or other charges by the government. Rates. Some are relate to property values that are not connected to property taxes. These are all issues. And of course, let's not forget licensing and assessment fees by government. So in terms of commercial property responsibility, tend to be primarily related to government levies and taxes and rates. Yes. The remember commercial business and government always wants to get. I think somebody's mic is open. Yeah. Okay. Number 7. How are some special assets held in a trust? Anyone?
Underlying companies.
Underlying companies, yes. Transferred by the settlers to an underlying company. And let's not forget donations to the trust. Okay. Okay, number 8. What is an underlying company in relation to a trust? What is an underlying? What's the relationship? How does it work?
that's your number 8, Mr. Wilkinson, because ours is different.
What's your number 8?
Our number 8 is what is the Bartlett clause?
Oh, interesting. I don't have that number 8 on my thing. Okay. Does somebody want to give that a run? What is the Bartlett clause? For the record. Give it a shot. Remember we talked about Bartlett?
To my understanding, it's where you would exclude the trustee from intervening in the management of the company, where the trust has shares or whole shares.
Is the word exclude that you want? Should the trustee be excluded from the management of the company? You
It's
definitely.
a form of indemnification type clause.
I think I know where you're going, but let me ask you something before we go there. if the trustee of a trust of an underlying company owns the majority or 100% of the shares, should they be excluded from the activities of the company?
If they own 100%?
Or
No.
the majority?
No.
Well,
I think it was like more so of as a director.
well, the thing that came in under Bartlett is this. If you are a trustee with shares in an underlying company, whether it's a minority, majority, or 100%, you as a trustee must know at all times under Bartlett what's going on. And if you fail to know what's going on, then you are negligent in your responsibility as trustee. Okay, that's the key. That's what Bartlett was all about. And so if you need to make yourself the managing director to know, fine. If you need to make yourself a director of the company to know, fine. If you want to assign a nominee to sit on the board and report to you as trustee, fine. Whatever you need to do. If you need to make sure that the people who are running the underlying company are running it the way it should, they must be required to send you reports. Remember, very meticulous and complete and accurate reports on what's going on. You're required to look at them and make decisions if you have any concerns. That's what Bartlett is all about. That the trustee with responsibility for an underlying company as trustee must always know what's going on. Because remember, no matter who's running the company, who is ultimately responsible?
Trustee.
Yes,
The trustee must always know what's going on in the company.
always. And they must do whatever is necessary to know. Whether it's get information, sit on the board, become the managing director of the company, whatever they need to do. But the one thing the trustee does not want to be saying is, oh, I didn't realize what was going on. And the Bartlett case is kind of like that. That trustee should never find themselves in that position. Okay. All right. What number was that on your sheet?
That was number 8.
All right. What's your number 9?
What is an international business company?
Okay, great. Now we're back on the same page. What is an international business company, anyone? What is the acronym for international business company?
IBC.
Yep. Under an IBC, an IBC is typically an underlying company that is established under the trust for the running of that company in order to minimize any risk.
Risk, expense, operation, and management.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why we have these IBCs as underlying companies. So we keep the operation separate from the trust, but the trust, by owning minority, majority, or 100% of the shares, is actually responsible for the company itself. Okay. All right, number 10. What are some of the benefits? Is that your number 10?
Yes.
And what are some of the benefits of an IBC as an underlying company? Anyone?
No capital gains, taxes, cost of incorporation are inexpensive, ease of operation, and confidentiality.
Absolutely. Which one do you think might be considered the most important one for offshore jurisdiction?
Confidentiality
Why do you say that?
and taxes.
Yeah, confidentiality and taxes, by all means. All of them are great, but confidentiality and taxes, man, settlers start dribbling when they see the provisions under confidentiality and taxes. That's like a dream come true. And that's why so many of us in offshore jurisdictions have been so successful over the years in obtaining and managing trusts and even underlying companies of a trust. All right, and then finally, let's look at the assessment for Unit 9 for these crazy folks in forced airship jurisdictions. We don't care what you want to do. We do it how we want to do it. Because we are the law. If you don't like it, leave. But I was born here. Well, you were born here, then you're subject. All right. Unit 9. Number 1. What are forced airship laws? What are forced airship laws?
That is when the civil law system is used, which determines how assets are dispersed after the death.
Yeah. After the death of the testator, the law of that country will determine how your assets will be dispersed. You do not get to determine that as the owner of those assets. Period. No matter how you gripe and complain. My. But how hard you worked. You already gave some to some of them in life and you don't want them to get any more when you die. How they mistreated you and kick you in your head every day, and so you're not leaving anything for them. Whatever reasons you give, doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the law. Number 2, significant powers are reserved to the settler under blank of the Trustee Act 1998 as amended to allow greater flexibility in creating trusts which meet the wealth planning needs and financial goals of foreign settlers, forced airship jurisdictions. Okay, section
3.
3, yes. Number 3, define an estate tax. Anyone?
A tax levied on the estate of the deceased.
Yes, the estate assets of the deceased. Or define an inheritance tax.
A tax imposed on the inheritance of the beneficiaries or heirs of a deceased estate.
Absolutely. So estate taxes relate to the owner of the assets. Inheritance tax relate to the beneficiary of those assets. Okay. Number 5, the blank allows a foreign settler, whether he is resident in the Bahamas or not, to declare the laws of the Bahamas as the proper or governing law of a trust which he creates.
Choice of Governing Law, Act 1989.
Yes, that's the Governing Law Act 1989. Number 6, the amendments to the Choice of Governing Law Act 1989, which are found in the blank, help to clarify the definition of heirship rights under the original act and invalidated the enforcement of foreign judgments relating to inheritance and matrimonial rights under forced heirship laws in the Bahamas. What goes into that blank? I know that one's a little subtle, but it should be the Choice of Governing Law Amended Act of 1996. Okay. As amended, originally as amended 1996. Number 7, the blank was enacted to protect asset protection trusts in the Bahamas from claims from future or unexpected creditors who may wish to attack such trusts. Answer?
That's the Fraudulent Disposition Act, 1991.
Yes, the Fraudulent Disposition Act of 1991. All right, number 8. What requirements must be met for a transfer or disposition of property into a Bahamian asset protection trust to be voidable?
The settler's debt or liability to the creditor must have existed at the time of the transfer or disposition of the property. Transfer must have been at an undervalue. Have been an intent to defraud the creditor when the transfer or disposition was made. The creditor must have been prejudiced due to the transfer or disposition. The creditor must bring an action with 2 years from the transfer of disposition.
Thank you very much. Let me ask you guys something. Somebody who has access to Google. What does the word prejudice mean? It has come up a few times. What is the word? What does Google say it means? In Google we trust. See that? In Google we trust. How about that? What does prejudice mean?
Preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience.
Yeah, preconceived. That's the key. That it's not based on reality or truth. So if you're in a situation that is prejudiced, it means somebody has come up with a preconceived notion. So for example, if I walk into that gay bar I told you about, I can be prejudiced. And that may not necessarily be fact. So if you find yourself in a prejudicial situation in law or otherwise, now you know it may not necessarily be something you should say, oh, thank you. Fabulous. I like that word. Prejudice sounds good. Not good. All right, number 9, what is the time frame for a creditor to commence an action to set aside, transfer or disposition into an asset protection trust as per question 8?
Within 2 years of the date of disposition.
Suppose it's 1 day after 2 years. Can you bring the action?
No, you can't.
No.
1 minute after 2 years.
No,
30 seconds.
within 2 years or nothing. Should be.
Welcome to the law. Now, watch this. Under the law, so let's say civil law, any law, it's 2 years or less. But under common sense, if it's 1 minute after 2 years, shouldn't you still do it?
Of
I
course.
mean, you should still try, yes.
Under equity even though it's 1 minute after 2 years, shouldn't you still consider it?
Yes.
Yes. So you see. The law of equity is quite different from the statutory law. My. But I won't get into that today. The law of equity versus statutory law, that's a whole different ball game. All right, number 10, define an asset protection trust.
Trusts that are created by the settlor upon transfer of his assets to the trust, subject to the terms of the trust to protect his assets normally from future or potential credit.
Thank you very much. Couldn't have put it better myself. That is exactly what an asset protection trust is all about. Okay. Okay. What can I say? You guys have been amazing. For these last sessions we've been in, it has been absolutely my pleasure. Did I give you guys my contact?
You did.
Okay,
Telephone
great.
contact? No. Yes.
Yeah, 565-9551.
Yes.
So if in your life and your
Sorry,
profession,
can you say that again?
565-9551.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. 5 1. Okay.
So if you have issues and you'd like to throw it by me, get feedback, I am a consultant by profession as well. I do consulting and all this stuff and compliance and training and all that crazy stuff. I do that, but I will not charge you if you have a question or concern. Please drop me a note and it'll be my pleasure to send a response. However, little market note, if you need somebody to blah, 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 you know where to find me. It'll be my pleasure to do that as well. Any questions before we break? All right, fantastic. Good luck with the rest of your program. I'm sure you guys will do well, not only with the session that you're doing at the moment, but also as you go forward in your professional lives. Good luck, and I'm only an email or a phone call away, okay?
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Wilkinson.
Pleasure, my pleasure.
Okay.
Have a good
Bye.
night. Enjoy your weekend, everyone.